When discussing Expendables 2, it is impossible to separate the movie itself from the sheer star power that carried it. This film was not designed to highlight one actor or one storyline, but instead to serve as a living tribute to the legends of action cinema, particularly from the 1980s and 1990s. The ensemble cast gathered for this movie represented decades of box office dominance, martial arts expertise, stunt performance, and iconic screen personas. For many fans, seeing these individuals together in one project was as much a nostalgic celebration as it was an action adventure. The movie became a rare cinematic event where entire careers converged, reminding audiences of the legacy these stars had built and showing how their personas still resonated years later. The leader of the team, Sylvester Stallone, carried the heart of the movie as Barney Ross. Stallone had already cemented his reputation as a global action icon through the Rocky and Rambo franchises. Rocky made him an Oscar-nominated writer and actor in the late 1970s, while Rambo defined the political and military aspects of action cinema throughout the 1980s. Before Expendables 2, Stallone had experienced both massive highs and periods of decline, but the Expendables franchise became one of his later career triumphs, proving he still commanded audiences worldwide. For Stallone, Expendables 2 reinforced his image not just as an action hero but as a curator of the genre, bringing together peers and rivals to share the spotlight. His role as Barney was almost autobiographical, a veteran leader who had seen it all and yet continued to push forward with grit and resilience. Arnold Schwarzenegger's inclusion was one of the major draws of Expendables 2. While he had only a small cameo in the first movie due to his political commitments as governor of California, he returned here in a larger capacity, reprising his role as Trench. Schwarzenegger's career had been a cultural phenomenon in itself. Films like the Terminator series, Predator, Total Recall, and True Lies made him one of the most recognizable stars in the world. His bodybuilding background, thick Austrian accent, and unique charisma set him apart in Hollywood. By the time he joined Expendables 2, he was transitioning back into films after years in politics, and his presence signaled both nostalgia and a comeback. Fans were thrilled to see him share the screen with Stallone and other veterans, something action enthusiasts had been imagining since the peak of their careers. Another major figure was Bruce Willis, who reprised his role as the shady CIA operative, Mr. Church. Willis had carved out a niche as the everyman action hero with the Die Hard series, beginning in 1988. Unlike some of his contemporaries, who played near-invincible warriors, Willis's John McClane was relatable, vulnerable, and often unwillingly thrust into chaos. His sarcastic wit and tough-but-human persona made him a different kind of action star. His presence in Expendables 2 added balance to the testosterone-heavy cast, blending charm with ruthlessness. While his role was not massive in terms of screen time, it was significant because it represented the uniting of yet another action titan with Stallone and Schwarzenegger, creating a cinematic trifecta audiences had long awaited. Jean-Claude Van Damme's appearance as the villain Jean Villain was another significant casting choice. Van Damme had been one of the most bankable martial arts stars of the late 1980s and 1990s, headlining movies like Bloodsport, Kickboxer, Universal Soldier, and Time Cop. Known for his agility, split kicks, and intense fight choreography, Van Damme built a career that leaned heavily on physical spectacle. By the time Expendables 2 came out, his career had slowed down and many of his projects were direct-to-video releases. Playing the villain gave him a chance to reinvent himself and tap into darker energies audiences had rarely seen from him. His climactic fight scene with Stallone became one of the movie's highlights, pitting two legends against each other in a symbolic passing of eras. Jet Li returned as Yin Yang, though his role was more limited compared to the first Expendables film. Li's career had established him as one of the most skilled martial artists to ever transition to Hollywood. After becoming a superstar in China through films like Once Upon a Time in China and Hero, he gained international attention with Lethal Weapon 4 and Romeo Must Die. Li brought a level of authenticity and precision to his fight choreography that few could match. Though his screen time in Expendables 2 was brief, his presence was still valuable, reminding audiences of the global reach of action cinema. Jason Statham played Lee Christmas, the second-in-command and a vital part of the Expendables franchise. Unlike the older veterans, Statham represented the new generation of action heroes. Before Expendables, he rose to fame through Guy Ritchie films like Lock, Stock and Two Smoking Barrels and Snatch, but it was the Transporter series and Crank that established his reputation as a modern-day action star. Statham's martial arts training, stunt work, and tough guy charisma made him an essential bridge between classic action cinema and contemporary styles. Expendables 2 solidified his status as the heir apparent to Stallone and Schwarzenegger, giving him equal footing with the legends he admired. Dolph Lundgren reprised his role as Gunnar Jensen, the unstable but loyal team member. Lundgren's career began explosively when he played Ivan Drago in Rocky IV opposite Stallone. His towering frame and cold delivery made him an unforgettable villain. Throughout the 80s and 90s, he appeared in numerous action films, including Masters of the Universe, Showdown in Little Tokyo, and Universal Soldier. By the 2000s, he had largely worked in smaller projects, but Expendables brought him back to mainstream visibility. Expendables 2 continued his redemption arc, both as a character and as an actor, allowing him to remind audiences of his charisma and physical presence. Randy Couture and Terry Crews rounded out the Expendables team. Couture, a decorated mixed martial arts fighter and former UFC champion, transitioned into acting later in life, bringing real combat experience to the screen. His role as Toll Road showcased both toughness and subtle humor. Terry Crews, known for his comedic timing and muscular physique, played Hail Caesar. Before Expendables, Crews had already built a career in comedy and action hybrids, appearing in movies like White Chicks, Friday After Next, and The Longest Yard. His role allowed him to flex both his physicality and his comedic side, which balanced the otherwise grim tone of the team. The movie also introduced Liam Hemsworth as Billy the Kid, a younger recruit whose tragic fate added emotional weight to the story. Hemsworth was at the start of his career at this point, best known for his role in The Hunger Games. Expendables 2 gave him a chance to work alongside industry legends, though his character's arc was short-lived. Still, it demonstrated the generational gap between the veterans and the rising stars of Hollywood. Expendables 2 was more than just another action movie release in 2012. It functioned as a cinematic event that tapped into a very specific cultural vein, nostalgia for the golden age of action films. Throughout the 1980s and early 1990s, the genre dominated theaters. It was an era when muscle-bound heroes, over-the-top explosions, witty one-liners, and simplified notions of good versus evil ruled the box office. By the 2000s, however, the action genre had shifted. Audiences gravitated towards superhero franchises, gritty reboots, or highly choreographed films influenced by Hong Kong cinema and CGI spectacle. In this changing landscape, Expendables 2 stood out as both a throwback and a reminder of how things once were, serving as a cultural bridge between generations. One of the film's greatest cultural impacts was its emphasis on collective nostalgia. Seeing Sylvester Stallone, Arnold Schwarzenegger, and Bruce Willis sharing scenes together was something action fans had dreamed about for decades. In the 1980s and 1990s, these stars were often framed as rivals, each dominating his own corner of Hollywood. Audiences would debate who was the greater hero, who had the better franchise, or who would win in an imaginary face-off. Expendables 2 erased those divides and united them on screen. This collaboration symbolized the way pop culture sometimes circles back on itself, reminding viewers of the power of shared history. The film also carried historical significance because of when it arrived. The early 2010s were a period of transition in cinema. Marvel's shared universe was beginning to dominate. Younger stars like Jason Statham and Dwayne Johnson were building momentum, and audiences were being introduced to new franchises built on heavy visual effects. Against this backdrop, Expendables 2 stood almost defiantly as a practical effects-heavy, stunt-driven, old-fashioned action film. It celebrated human physicality, choreographed fights, and explosive set pieces that relied less on computer graphics and more on traditional filmmaking. In this way, the movie became a time capsule, capturing an earlier Hollywood spirit that many thought had been left behind. Memes, references, and internet humor also played a large role in sustaining the cultural life of Expendables 2. The film's abundance of one-liners, many of them intentionally self-referential, quickly spread across online communities. Arnold Schwarzenegger's repeated use of his classic, "I'll be back," line became a wink to the audience and a frequent punchline in internet culture. Bruce Willis mocking him with "You've been back enough" turned into another meme, representing the playful rivalry between these stars. In fact, the movie's self-awareness made it ripe for internet sharing, as fans quoted lines, shared GIFs, and spliced scenes into comedic montages. Expendables 2 was not just consumed in theaters, it was recycled into the digital humor ecosystem, extending its presence well beyond its release. Politically and socially, the movie indirectly touched on broader themes of generational change. The Expendables team represented veterans, older fighters who had endured countless battles, while Liam Hemsworth's younger character symbolized new blood. His tragic fate reminded audiences of the high cost of war and hinted at the passing of the torch. While the movie did not overtly position itself as political commentary, some critics and fans noted how it resonated with ideas about aging, relevance, and how societies view their heroes. In a time when Hollywood was increasingly focused on youth and modernity, Expendables 2 argued for the value of experience, resilience, and toughness built over time. In terms of pop culture trends, the movie also fueled a brief revival of interest in ensemble action films. While ensemble casts were not new, Expendables 2 demonstrated how the collective presence of legends could generate excitement even if the narrative itself was straightforward. This concept influenced later projects that tried to replicate the formula by gathering familiar faces, either within the action genre or in adjacent spaces like comedy or horror. Though few matched the same scale of star power, Expendables 2 showed that audiences loved the concept of legends joining forces. There is also an intertextual element to consider. Expendables 2 referenced and borrowed heavily from the cultural history of its stars. Schwarzenegger's famous lines from Terminator, Willis's sarcastic delivery reminiscent of Die Hard, Van Damme's martial arts bravado, and Stallone's gravelly speeches that recalled Rambo and Rocky, all of these brought layers of meaning to the film. In this sense, Expendables 2 was not just telling a story, it was weaving together decades of film history into one narrative. Each actor carried their cinematic baggage with them, and the audience was expected to recognize these layers. It was almost like watching a crossover event in comic books, where separate universes collide for the sake of fan spectacle. The film also resonated internationally in a unique way. Many of the stars had been global icons for decades, and Expendables 2 became a unifying point for fans across cultures. Action cinema has always had strong international appeal because it transcends language barriers. Explosions, fights, and spectacle are universal forms of storytelling. The movie performed particularly well in markets where action stars like Stallone, Van Damme, and Jet Li had long enjoyed loyal followings. Its success reaffirmed the global nature of action cinema and how nostalgia operates across borders. More subtly, Expendables 2 contributed to conversations about masculinity in popular culture. The film was unapologetically masculine, showcasing hypermuscular bodies, brotherhood forged through violence, and camaraderie under fire. In an era when Hollywood was beginning to challenge and diversify representations of gender roles, Expendables 2 doubled down on a traditional, almost exaggerated form of masculinity. For some, this was regressive. For others, it was comforting, a return to familiar tropes. Either way, the movie forced audiences to confront what kind of masculinity they valued in cinema and how it should evolve. Historically, the Expendables franchise, and especially its second installment, created a shared cultural reference point for multiple generations. Older audiences remembered the glory days of action cinema, while younger viewers were introduced to the legends their parents had idolized. This bridging of eras is rare in Hollywood, where movies often target one demographic at a time. Expendables 2 managed to unite fans across age groups by appealing to both nostalgia and novelty. The making of Expendables 2 was as eventful and layered as the film itself. Bringing together such a wide array of action stars, many of whom had built careers spanning decades, required careful planning, compromise, and at times a willingness to poke fun at themselves. The film was directed by Simon West, who had previously made a name for himself with Con Air, a movie celebrated for its over-the-top action and larger-than-life performances. West's selection as director signaled a deliberate choice to embrace a sense of spectacle and bombast, rather than opting for a gritty or realistic tone. His experience with action-driven storytelling and ensemble casts prepared him for the monumental task of managing so many strong personalities on one set. The film's production was based in Bulgaria, with New Boyana Film Studio serving as the primary shooting location. This decision was both economical and practical. Bulgaria had become a popular destination for Hollywood productions in the 2000s because of its lower costs and wide variety of landscapes that could substitute for multiple international locations. In Expendables 2, scenes meant to represent Eastern Europe, remote villages, and various battlegrounds were all crafted from sets and scenery in Bulgaria. The choice to film there also allowed the production to invest heavily in large-scale stunts and pyrotechnics, something that would have been more difficult and expensive in the United States. One of the most challenging aspects of the shoot was coordinating the schedules of the film's star-studded cast. Many of these actors were juggling multiple projects or commitments. Arnold Schwarzenegger, for instance, was just returning to Hollywood after his tenure as governor of California, and his availability was limited. Bruce Willis had ongoing commitments to other films. Jet Li was splitting his time between Hollywood and projects in Asia. Scheduling conflicts meant that some actors were only present for short stretches, which explains why certain characters, like Li Xinyang, had noticeably less screen time. Nevertheless, clever editing and writing helped weave together their appearances into a cohesive narrative. Behind the camera, the production faced tragedy. During the filming of a stunt sequence involving an explosion on a boat near the Ognianovo Reservoir in Bulgaria, a stunt double was killed and another was critically injured. This incident cast a somber shadow over the shoot and raised questions about the safety standards on set. Action films of this scale often rely heavily on stunt performers to bring authenticity to dangerous sequences, and Expendables 2 was no exception. The tragedy was a stark reminder of the risks inherent in creating high-octane entertainment. Following the accident, the production was temporarily paused, and safety protocols were re-evaluated. Stallone himself later acknowledged the incident with sorrow, emphasizing the sacrifices stunt performers make to bring these stories to life. Despite these challenges, there were lighter moments on set, many of them stemming from the camaraderie between the cast. Stories have circulated about the playful rivalries between Stallone, Schwarzenegger, and Willis. Each was known for his ego and strong presence, but on set, this tension often turned into humor. Their scenes together were shot with a sense of tongue-in-cheek acknowledgement, as if the actors themselves were aware of the absurdity of finally standing shoulder to shoulder after decades of supposed competition. According to accounts from crew members, there was plenty of laughter during these sequences, with the actors improvising lines or exaggerating their trademark personas to entertain not only the cameras, but also each other. Another interesting behind-the-scenes element was Jean-Claude Van Damme's approach to his role as the villain. Van Damme had turned down an opportunity to appear in the first Expendables, but for the sequel, he agreed to play Jean Villain, a name that was intentionally on the nose. He leaned fully into the exaggerated nature of the character, combining his martial arts expertise with a theatrical performance that bordered on self-parody. Van Damme reportedly enjoyed the freedom to play a villain, as it allowed him to explore a darker side of his persona and reintroduce himself to mainstream audiences. His climactic fight with Stallone was carefully choreographed, requiring extensive rehearsal to balance both men's distinctive fighting styles. Stallone's heavier, boxing-influenced movements were contrasted with Van Damme's fluid, kicking-based martial arts, and the sequence was designed to showcase the strengths of both actors. The choice to elevate Jason Statham's role as Lee Christmas was another behind-the-scenes decision influenced by audience response. After the first Expendables, fans praised Statham's presence and chemistry with Stallone. He represented the bridge between the old guard and a younger generation, and producers recognized his growing popularity. As a result, Expendables 2 gave him more screen time, more banter, and several standout action sequences, including knife fights and close combat battles that highlighted his athleticism and stunt training. Statham, who often performed his own stunts, added a layer of authenticity to the movie's physicality. The visual effects and practical stunts were another area where the production team made deliberate choices. While Hollywood was increasingly leaning on CGI by 2012, Expendables 2 relied heavily on practical explosions, gunfire, and fight choreography. Entire villages were built only to be destroyed on camera. This commitment to old-school effects was not only a stylistic choice but also a homage to the films that had made the cast famous. However, digital effects were still used in post-production to enhance certain scenes, particularly large-scale explosions or blood effects during shootouts. The blending of practical and digital techniques created a balance that felt modern while still rooted in tradition. Director Simon West also had to juggle tone. Expendables 2 was intended to be bigger and bolder than its predecessor, leaning more into humor and self-awareness. The first film had taken itself quite seriously, with darker themes about aging mercenaries and the toll of violence. For the sequel, the studio and Stallone, who co-wrote the script, wanted a lighter, more exaggerated tone. This is why the film features so many winks to the audience, from Schwarzenegger and Willis referencing their own catchphrases to Terry Crews delivering comedic relief in the midst of battle. Striking this balance was not easy, but West's direction helped maintain a sense of fun even amid large-scale destruction. Behind the scenes, the film's production also highlighted the logistical challenges of working with such a diverse cast. Language barriers, cultural differences, and varying work styles had to be navigated carefully. Jet Li's scenes, for instance, were shot separately in some cases due to his schedule and location preferences. Stallone, who had directed the first Expendables, took a step back from directing this one, allowing West to handle the daily pressures while still maintaining heavy creative involvement as a writer and producer. This shift allowed Stallone to focus more on his performance and on the interpersonal dynamics of the cast. Expendables 2 does not attempt to disguise its intentions with elaborate subplots or experimental narrative techniques. Instead, it embraces a straightforward, old-school action movie framework, carefully constructed to deliver spectacle, camaraderie, and moments of fan service. While the film may appear simple on the surface, its structure is more deliberately engineered than it first seems. Every beat is placed to highlight the strengths of its ensemble cast, while also ensuring that audiences are never far from the next explosion, one-liner, or hand-to-hand combat sequence. The film opens with a spectacular prologue in Nepal, where the Expendables storm a military compound to rescue a kidnapped Chinese businessman. This sequence establishes the tone immediately: large-scale action, team dynamics, and exaggerated violence. It also introduces Yin Yang's exit from the group, as he escorts the rescued hostage back home, explaining Jet Li's reduced presence in the rest of the film. Narratively, this introduction serves as both a standalone mini-mission and a reintroduction of the team for audiences who may not have seen the first film. It sets up the Expendables as a seasoned, efficient unit capable of executing impossible missions with flair and humor. From there, the film shifts to its central storyline when the team is approached by Mr. Church, the CIA operative played by Bruce Willis. Church demands that Barney Ross and his crew repay a debt from the first film by retrieving a mysterious item from a crashed plane in Albania. This mission forms the backbone of the narrative, and while it seems simple, it quickly escalates into a far larger conflict. The object in question turns out to be a map leading to a cache of plutonium hidden from the Soviet era. The villains, led by Jean Villain, seek to exploit this resource for profit and power, threatening global security. The introduction of Jean Villain as the antagonist is handled with deliberate theatricality. Played by Jean-Claude Van Damme, Villain arrives with an army of mercenaries known as the Sangs. His entrance scene is marked by menace and brutality as he forces the Expendables into submission and then executes Billy the Kid, the youngest member of the team played by Liam Hemsworth. This moment is pivotal in the film's structure. It provides the emotional hook that fuels the Expendables' revenge arc, and it differentiates Expendables 2 from its predecessor by giving the story a personal loss. Billy's death transforms the mission from a contractual obligation into a personal vendetta, adding weight to what could have otherwise been a series of disconnected battles. After this turning point, the film follows a classic revenge structure, where each action sequence propels the team closer to confronting Villain. The pacing is intentionally relentless, alternating between large-scale battles and smaller character moments. For example, Statham's character, Lee Christmas, gets his own highlight during a knife fight sequence, allowing him to showcase his skills while breaking up the group dynamic with individualized action. Similarly, Terry Crews and Dolph Lundgren get moments to display their distinctive fighting styles, ensuring that each member of the ensemble has a chance to shine. Narratively, the film incorporates several moments of fan service that double as structural beats. The inclusion of Arnold Schwarzenegger's Trench and Chuck Norris's Booker serve as cameos that energize the narrative at key moments. Booker's introduction, where he single-handedly wipes out an entire squad of enemies, functions as a deus ex machina, bailing the Expendables out of a hopeless situation. Structurally, this sequence might seem unnecessary, but it plays into the film's larger mission of celebrating its stars. Booker's role also provides comic relief, particularly through exaggerated references to Chuck Norris jokes that had circulated widely on the internet. These interludes give audiences a break from the revenge-driven narrative, while still maintaining momentum. The middle portion of the film is built around escalating confrontations with the Sangs, interspersed with scenes of planning, regrouping, and bonding. The Expendables are not portrayed as flawless superheroes. They are weary veterans who rely on their experience, loyalty, and improvisation to survive. These quieter moments of camaraderie help balance the bombast of the action, reminding the audience of the brotherhood at the heart of the film. Barney's growing weariness, Christmas's loyalty, and Gunner's comic instability all add depth to the otherwise linear plot. The climax of the film is staged at an abandoned airport, where the Expendables face off against Villain and his army in an extended battle. Structurally, this finale mirrors the structure of the prologue, but on a much larger scale. Where the opening mission was a showcase of precision and control, the final showdown is chaos, with the Expendables fighting against overwhelming odds. During this sequence, Schwarzenegger and Willis are given extended screen time, trading lines and gunfire alongside Stallone in what feels like the culmination of decades of fan fantasies. Their banter, filled with meta-references to their own careers, becomes part of the narrative texture, blurring the line between the actors and their characters. The most significant structural element of the climax is the one-on-one showdown between Barney Ross and Gene Villain. This fight is set apart from the chaos of the larger battle, isolating the personal vendetta that has driven the story since Billy's death. The choreography of the fight reflects the differences between the two men. Barney is brute strength and resilience, while Villain is agility and precision. The fight builds to a brutal conclusion, where Barney kills Villain with his own weapon, symbolizing poetic justice. This duel provides catharsis for both the characters and the audience, tying the revenge narrative to a personal confrontation. The resolution of the film is relatively straightforward. The Expendables honor Billy's memory, reflecting on the cost of their lifestyle. Despite their victory, there is an underlying acknowledgement of mortality and aging. The narrative closes not on triumph, but on a bittersweet note, with the team reaffirming their bond and accepting that their lives will continue to be defined by conflict and sacrifice. This ending ties into the broader themes of legacy and relevance, preparing the ground for future installments while still providing closure for the immediate story. From a structural perspective, Expendables 2 follows the three-act model closely, with a clear setup, confrontation, and resolution. The prologue sets up the characters and tone, the middle act introduces the antagonist and escalates the conflict, and the final act delivers both spectacle and emotional payoff. What differentiates it from other action films is the way it layers metatextual commentary on top of this structure. The film is not just telling a story about mercenaries, it is telling a story about action cinema itself, with each beat doubling as a celebration of its stars' careers. In terms of pacing, the film is carefully designed to never let more than a few minutes pass without some form of action or humor. Dialogue scenes are kept short and often punctuated with jokes or foreshadowing of the next battle. Expendables May 2nd present itself as a loud, straightforward action movie brimming with explosions, one-liners, and shootouts, but underneath the spectacle lies a series of themes and symbolic layers that give the film surprising weight. These themes are not always subtle or complex, but they resonate because they tap into universal ideas: aging, loyalty, revenge, legacy, and the passage of time. The film also employs recurring visual and narrative symbols that reinforce its exploration of these ideas, often in ways that blur the line between the characters' fictional struggles and the real-life personas of the actors themselves. One of the most prominent themes is aging and relevance. The Expendables team is composed almost entirely of older mercenaries, men who have spent their lives fighting, killing, and surviving, and who now find themselves questioning their place in the world. Barney Ross, played by Sylvester Stallone, embodies this theme most directly. He is a man haunted by his past, carrying scars both physical and emotional, yet he continues to lead his team into battles. His leadership is tinged with melancholy, as if he knows his time is running out but refuses to let go. The film symbolically contrasts the Expendables with Billy the Kid, the young sniper played by Liam Hemsworth. Billy represents youth, new beginnings, and the possibility of escape from a life of violence. When he is killed early in the story, it becomes a powerful symbol of the Expendables' inability to escape their fate. They are men bound to a cycle of violence, unable to walk away even when they try. The theme of revenge is another central thread. Billy's death at the hands of Jean Villain is not just a plot device, it is a symbolic act that redefines the Expendables' mission. What begins as a job for money and obligation transforms into a personal vendetta. Revenge becomes the emotional engine driving the film, reflecting a classic trope of action cinema. But in this case, revenge also symbolizes something deeper. The Expendables need to prove that their lives still have meaning. Avenging Billy is not only about justice, it is about reaffirming their purpose in a world that increasingly sees them as outdated relics. Loyalty and brotherhood form another key theme, woven into the interactions between the team members. The Expendables are less a mercenary outfit and more a surrogate family. Each man is flawed, scarred, and often unstable, yet their bond is unbreakable. This loyalty is highlighted in moments of banter, sacrifice, and shared grief. Gunnar Jensen, played by Dolph Lundgren, is portrayed as erratic and unpredictable, yet the team continues to accept him because of his loyalty. Lee Christmas, Jason Statham's character, repeatedly demonstrates his devotion to Barney, standing by him even when the odds are impossible. This sense of brotherhood symbolizes the way real-life action stars of the 80s and 90s have supported and competed with one another throughout their careers. On screen, it becomes a metaphor for enduring friendship forged through hardship. The symbolism of weapons and combat styles also plays a role in reinforcing themes. Each character's weapon reflects his personality and place within the group. Barney's reliance on heavy firearms represents his brute strength and direct approach. Christmas's preference for knives symbolizes precision, control, and a certain elegance in violence. Hail Caesar, played by Terry Crews, wields oversized weapons that reflect his larger-than-life personality and role as comic relief. These choices are not arbitrary. They serve as symbolic extensions of identity, showing how the characters define themselves through their tools of survival. Aging as a theme is also symbolized visually through the juxtaposition of old and new. The Expendables are constantly framed against younger, fresher opponents, yet they rely on experience and resilience to win. The presence of Billy the Kid as a doomed young recruit makes this contrast painfully clear. The Expendables world is one where youth cannot survive, and only those hardened by decades of violence endure. Symbolically, this suggests that experience and toughness, rather than raw talent, are the true markers of survival in their world. Death, loss, and sacrifice permeate the narrative as underlying themes. Billy's death sets the emotional tone, but the Expendables themselves are constantly aware of their own mortality. Their conversations often reference past battles, fallen comrades, and the inevitability of their fate. Barney's stoic demeanor masks a deep awareness that his lifestyle cannot last forever. In this way, death becomes a constant presence, not only as a threat from enemies, but as an existential reality. Symbolically, the Expendables represent aging warriors who know their time is limited, yet they continue to fight because fighting is the only life they understand. The villain, Jean Villain, is symbolic in his own right. His very name is a tongue-in-cheek reference, but his role represents more than just a generic antagonist. Villain symbolizes greed, amorality, and the exploitation of power without responsibility. His pursuit of plutonium is not just a quest for wealth, but a metaphor for reckless ambition. By hoarding weapons of mass destruction, he embodies the destructive potential of unchecked desire. His contrast with Barney is symbolic of two different philosophies, one defined by loyalty and sacrifice, the other by selfishness and cruelty. When Barney kills Villain in their final confrontation, it symbolizes not just revenge, but the triumph of loyalty and honor over greed. Another recurring theme is legacy. The Expendables are constantly grappling with questions of what they will leave behind. They are men without families, without stability, and without the luxury of retirement. Their legacy is defined by the battles they fought and the people they saved. Billy's letter to his girlfriend, written before his death, serves as a symbolic reminder of what could have been, a life beyond violence. The Expendables read his words and reflect on their own inability to escape the life of mercenaries. The film suggests that their legacy may not be personal happiness, but rather the stories others will tell about them, echoing the way the actors themselves are remembered for their roles more than their private lives. Symbolism also appears in the visual motifs scattered throughout the movie. Scenes set in crumbling villages and abandoned buildings symbolize the Expendables themselves, relics of another era, still standing but scarred and weathered. The use of heavy machinery, collapsing structures, and fiery explosions underscores the theme of destruction as both a literal and metaphorical force. Every mission they undertake leaves ruins behind, just as their lives are marked by destruction. This imagery reinforces the idea that they are survivors in a world that has already moved on from them. Humor and self-awareness play their own symbolic role. When characters like Trench, Arnold Schwarzenegger, or Mr. Church, Bruce Willis, trade self-referential one-liners, they are not only making jokes but also symbolizing a conversation between the past and present of action cinema. These moments acknowledge the audience directly, breaking the fourth wall, without literally doing so. In this sense, the film becomes symbolic of its own genre, a commentary on the cliches, tropes, and excesses of action movies. Expendables 2, at its core, is a film that thrives on visual excess. It is not subtle in its imagery, nor does it seek to reinvent the language of action cinema. Instead, it embraces an unapologetic, larger-than-life style that amplifies every explosion, every punch, and every gunshot to operatic proportions. The cinematography and visual design choices reflect this philosophy, combining traditional action filmmaking techniques with modern enhancements. The result is a movie that both honors the gritty aesthetics of 1980s action films and adapts them for contemporary audiences who expect sharper visuals and faster pacing. The cinematographer, Shelley Johnson, approached the film with a deliberate emphasis on clarity during action sequences. One of the common criticisms of modern action films, especially in the 2000s, was the overuse of shaky cam and rapid editing that often obscured the choreography. Expendables 2 avoids this pitfall by presenting fight scenes in a way that highlights the physicality of its stars. Wide shots are frequently used to showcase the full bodies of the actors, allowing audiences to appreciate the authenticity of their movements. This is particularly effective in sequences featuring Jason Statham and Jean-Claude Van Damme, both of whom rely on martial arts techniques that are best captured when the camera does not cut away too quickly. The film also leans heavily on a muted, gritty color palette, dominated by shades of gray, brown, and military green. This palette reflects the war-torn environments in which the Expendables operate. Much of the action takes place in Eastern European landscapes, dilapidated villages, and industrial complexes, all of which are filmed with a cold, desaturated look. This choice symbolizes the bleakness of the Expendables world, a place where beauty has been stripped away by violence and conflict. At the same time, the muted tones allow explosions, gunfire, and blood effects to stand out more vividly, drawing the eye to the chaos of combat. Lighting plays a crucial role in shaping the visual style. Many sequences are staged in low light or shadow, emphasizing the Expendables as figures who operate on the margins of society. The use of chiaroscuro lighting, where faces are half-lit and half-obscured, adds a sense of mystery and weariness to the characters. Barney Ross, in particular, is often filmed in dimly lit interiors or under harsh backlighting, reinforcing his persona as a battle-worn leader whose life is consumed by conflict. By contrast, Jean Villain is frequently shown in brighter, more controlled lighting, highlighting his arrogance and dominance. This contrast in lighting subtly reinforces the moral divide between hero and villain. The camera work varies depending on the scale of the action. In large-scale battle scenes, the camera often pulls back to wide angles, capturing the chaos of multiple characters fighting simultaneously. This creates a sense of scope and spectacle, as entire villages are reduced to rubble in carefully choreographed destruction. In contrast, during intimate confrontations, such as the final duel between Barney and Villain, the camera moves in closer, emphasizing the sweat, strain, and brutality of hand-to-hand combat. This shift between wide and tight framing allows the film to alternate between epic grandeur and personal intensity, maintaining a dynamic rhythm throughout. Symbolism is also embedded in the cinematography. The frequent use of ruined landscapes and collapsing structures serves as a visual metaphor for the Expendables themselves, aging warriors standing amidst the wreckage of their past. Fire and smoke dominate the backgrounds of many shots, representing not only destruction but also rebirth through violence. The Expendables are men who create and live within chaos. The flames around them symbolize both the hell they inhabit and the furnace that continues to forge their identities. The use of slow motion is another stylistic hallmark of the film. Slow-motion shots are deployed to highlight moments of impact, such as an explosion tearing through a building or a knife finding its mark. These sequences elevate ordinary action beats into operatic spectacle, demanding that the audience savor each moment of carnage. While some might see this as indulgent, it fits perfectly with the film's overall aesthetic of excess. Expendables 2 is not striving for realism, it is striving for heightened reality, where every gunshot and every punch feels monumental. Special effects also contribute significantly to the visual style. While the production favored practical effects for explosions and stunts, digital enhancements were layered in during post-production. Computer-generated blood effects, for instance, were used extensively during gunfights. This gave the film a stylized, almost comic book-like quality, where violence is exaggerated to the point of becoming surreal. The blending of practical and digital effects creates a hybrid aesthetic that acknowledges both the gritty traditions of the past and the demands of modern audiences for heightened spectacle. Another distinctive visual motif is the framing of the Expendables as a collective unit. Many shots position the team together, walking in formation or standing side by side, their silhouettes dominating the frame. These images serve as visual shorthand for unity, strength, and brotherhood. They also recall the iconic group shots of war films and westerns, genres that heavily influenced action cinema. The Expendables are presented not just as individuals, but as a legendary unit, their collective presence more powerful than any one man. The film's visual style also embraces self-awareness. Certain scenes, particularly those involving cameos from Chuck Norris or extended appearances by Schwarzenegger and Willis, are filmed with an almost exaggerated clarity, as if inviting the audience to pause and soak in the spectacle of seeing these legends together. The camera lingers on their faces longer than necessary, and their entrances are staged with dramatic flair, often accompanied by swelling music and deliberate framing. This approach acknowledges the metatextual layer of the film, where the visual style is not only serving the story, but also celebrating the actors themselves. The cinematography of Expendables 2 also plays with spatial dynamics. Action scenes often feature confined interiors followed by explosive exits into wide-open spaces. This pattern creates a rhythm where tension builds in small, claustrophobic settings before exploding outward into chaos. It mirrors the Expendables' own lives, moments of intimacy and camaraderie interrupted by bursts of overwhelming violence. This deliberate structuring of space adds depth to what could otherwise be mindless spectacle. While Expendables 2 does not aim for the artistry of auteur-driven cinema, its visual style is nonetheless carefully crafted to serve its thematic goals and audience expectations. It uses clarity to showcase physicality, muted colors to emphasize bleakness, lighting contrasts to symbolize morality, and framing to highlight brotherhood. Its reliance on spectacle and exaggeration is not accidental but intentional, reinforcing the film's identity as both homage and parody of classic action cinema. The Expendables 2 is a film that lives and dies by the energy of its action sequences, and while visuals often take center stage, the soundtrack and sound design are just as important in creating the overall experience. The roar of gunfire, the rumble of explosions, the clash of fists, and the swelling orchestral score all combine to make the film's world feel larger than life. The soundscape of Expendables 2 is not subtle, nor is it intended to be. It is a carefully orchestrated assault on the senses, designed to amplify adrenaline and give every moment a visceral punch. The score, composed by Brian Tyler, sets the tone for the film with a mixture of pounding percussion, dramatic orchestral flourishes, and electronic elements that add modern weight. Tyler, known for his work on other action franchises, understood the need to capture both the intensity of large-scale battles and the emotional undertones of camaraderie and loss. His compositions often layer heavy brass sections over relentless drum patterns, creating a sense of urgency and danger. During scenes of high-octane combat, the score pushes forward with a militaristic rhythm, echoing the relentless march of mercenaries into war zones. In quieter moments, such as the reflection on Billy's letter, Tyler shifts into more subdued, melancholic melodies, underscoring the humanity beneath the violence. The leitmotif technique is used throughout the soundtrack to tie characters and themes together. The Expendables as a team are often accompanied by recurring heroic motifs, musical phrases that rise and fall with their collective presence. These motifs act as auditory symbols of unity and strength, reinforcing the bond between the characters. In contrast, Gene Villain's appearances are often supported by darker, more dissonant tones, with lower strings and menacing chords that signal his malevolent presence. This musical dichotomy between hero and villain helps to guide the audience's emotional response, even before dialogue or visuals fully establish the stakes of a scene. Sound effects are perhaps the most defining aspect of Expendables 2's audio design. Every weapon, every punch, and every explosion is exaggerated for maximum impact. Firearms, for instance, do not sound like their real-world counterparts. Instead, each gunshot is amplified into a thunderous crack, resonating with enough force to feel like a small explosion in itself. This choice ensures that the audience feels the sheer power of the weapons, reinforcing the action as spectacle rather than realism. Knives, the weapon of choice for Jason Statham's character, are given sharp, slicing sound effects that cut through the mix with precision. These auditory cues become extensions of character identity just as much as the visual design of their weapons. Explosions are treated as symphonic events in their own right. They are layered with multiple sound elements, deep bass rumbles, mid-range cracks, and high-pitched shrapnel whizzes that create a three-dimensional effect. When a building collapses or a vehicle detonates, the sound design ensures that the audience not only hears the destruction but feels it vibrating through their bodies. This use of layered sound is one of the reasons the action in Expendables 2 feels so overwhelming, as the audio fully immerses viewers in the chaos. The film also makes clever use of silence and restraint. In key moments, such as the build-up before an ambush or the tense seconds before an explosion, the soundtrack often drops away to allow ambient sounds, footsteps, breathing, rustling leaves, to dominate the soundscape. This contrast heightens anticipation, making the sudden eruption of noise even more powerful. When Billy is captured and later killed, the sound design shifts into a more subdued register, with echoes and minimal score emphasizing the gravity of the moment. Silence becomes symbolic of loss, amplifying the emotional weight of his absence. Dialogue delivery is another integral part of the sound design. The film script is packed with quips, one-liners, and tough guy banter, and the way these lines are recorded and mixed ensures they cut through even the loudest firefights. Arnold Schwarzenegger's "I'll be back" callback, for instance, is mixed so that it lands with maximum clarity, almost as though it were designed to echo in the audience's memory. Chuck Norris's lines are delivered with deliberate pauses, allowing audiences time to react and laugh before the action resumes. These choices highlight how the sound design accommodates not just action but also humor and self-referential moments. The film's use of environmental sound further grounds the spectacle. Battles taking place in villages include layers of crumbling debris, distant shouts, and the whine of ricocheting bullets. Jungle scenes are filled with the hum of insects and rustling foliage, providing a constant reminder of setting even amid explosions. The sound of helicopters and vehicles is given a distinct prominence, their engines roaring like beasts to emphasize both danger and mobility. These environmental layers enrich the film's world, ensuring that it feels immersive even when the primary focus is the characters themselves. Beyond the purely functional aspects, the soundtrack also carries symbolic meaning. The relentless percussion and driving rhythms symbolize the unstoppable march of time and the Expendables' inability to escape their violent lives. The melancholic melodies tied to Billy symbolize lost innocence and the path not taken. The heroic motifs associated with the Expendables serve as a reminder of their legacy, elevating them into mythic figures. The soundscape itself becomes a form of storytelling, embedding themes within the audience's subconscious through tonal choices. The integration of score and sound design is seamless. In many sequences, the music and sound effects seem to dance together, each enhancing the other. A barrage of gunfire may align with a crescendo in the score, creating a symphony of destruction. Explosions often hit on musical beats, reinforcing rhythm through chaos. This synchronization ensures that the audience experiences action not as random noise, but as orchestrated spectacle, reinforcing the film's operatic quality. When Expendables 2 was released in 2012, it arrived with the kind of anticipation usually reserved for superhero blockbusters or major franchise installments. Audiences were drawn not only by the promise of high-octane action but also by the sheer novelty of its ensemble cast, a cinematic dream team of action legends who had defined decades of the genre. The reception, however, was mixed. While many fans celebrated the film as a triumphant throwback to classic action cinema, critics were more divided, some praising the spectacle and others dismissing it as shallow, excessive, or overly reliant on nostalgia. This duality of reception has shaped how the film is remembered, both as a box office success and as a cultural curiosity that highlights the enduring appeal of its stars. Audiences were generally enthusiastic, particularly fans of the action genre. The movie grossed more than $310 million worldwide, outpacing the first Expendables and solidifying its place as a financial success. Many viewers were thrilled to see their favorite action icons, Sylvester Stallone, Arnold Schwarzenegger, Bruce Willis, Jean-Claude Van Damme, and Chuck Norris, sharing the screen in ways that had once seemed impossible. Theaters often erupted with cheers and laughter at the actors' self-referential one-liners, such as Schwarzenegger's "I'll be back," or Norris delivering a Chuck Norris joke with complete seriousness. For many, the experience of watching Expendables 2 was less about narrative depth and more about participating in a communal celebration of action movie history. Critically, the film fared less favorably. Many reviewers noted that while Expendables 2 improved upon its predecessor in terms of pacing and action clarity, it still suffered from weak plotting and thin character development. Some critics argued that the movie was essentially a series of set pieces stitched together with minimal story, a complaint that reflected broader concerns about spectacle-driven cinema. The humor, while enjoyed by audiences, was described by some critics as pandering or too reliant on nostalgia. The film's reliance on exaggerated violence and digital blood effects also divided reviewers, with some praising the over-the-top style as campy fun, while others dismissed it as cartoonish and uninspired. On the positive side, Many critics acknowledged that Expendables 2 succeeded in delivering exactly what it promised. It never pretended to be high art, nor did it attempt to reinvent the genre. Instead, it embraced its identity as an overblown action extravaganza and leaned fully into the strengths of its cast. Jean-Claude Van Damme, in particular, received praise for his performance as the villain Jean Villain. Critics highlighted his charisma, energy, and willingness to embrace his role with theatrical flair, elevating the film's antagonistic presence. Similarly, Liam Hemsworth's brief but poignant role as Billy the Kid was singled out for adding a touch of emotional weight to an otherwise bombastic story. However, others saw these performances as exceptions rather than the rule. Much of the criticism centered on the Expendables themselves, who were often described as caricatures rather than characters. Stallone's Barney Ross was criticized for being stoic to the point of blandness, while some reviewers felt that the inclusion of so many stars left little room for genuine character development. With so many icons vying for screen time, no one actor was given enough space to fully explore his role. This critique reflected a recurring tension in ensemble films. The desire to showcase everyone equally often dilutes the narrative focus. Another area of criticism involved the film's tone. While the blend of action and humor delighted many fans, some critics felt the tonal shifts undermined the stakes of the story. The constant barrage of jokes and self-referential quips, while entertaining in isolation, sometimes clashed with the more serious themes of loss and revenge. For example, the emotional weight of Billy's death was quickly overshadowed by scenes of exaggerated violence and comedic exchanges, leading some to argue that the film lacked tonal consistency. From a technical standpoint, reviews of the film's visual and audio design were also mixed. The clarity of the action sequences was often praised, especially when compared to the shaky cam trend popular in other contemporary films. Yet the overuse of digital blood effects was criticized as cheap-looking and unnecessary, detracting from the otherwise practical stunt work. Some critics argued that the film could have leaned more heavily on practical effects to better capture the gritty authenticity of the genre it was paying homage to. The film also faced criticism from more politically inclined commentators. Some viewed Expendables 2 as a glorification of militarism and hypermasculinity, suggesting that its depiction of violence lacked nuance or moral complexity. The Expendables' reliance on brute force and their dismissal of political or ethical considerations was seen by some as emblematic of a dated worldview. Yet for others, this very quality was part of the film's charm. It harkened back to a simpler cinematic era when action heroes were defined by physical strength and moral clarity, however exaggerated. Controversy also arose from behind-the-scenes stories, particularly disputes between the production team and actors. Bruce Willis's limited involvement and rumored conflicts over pay became a talking point in the film's reception, even though these issues primarily affected future installments. Chuck Norris's involvement sparked minor controversy as well, with reports that he pushed for a toned-down rating in some markets. Though the final film was ultimately rated R, these behind-the-scenes narratives colored the way some critics and fans perceived the film, adding an additional layer of intrigue or frustration, depending on their perspective. Despite the mixed reviews, Expendables 2 earned a reputation as a cult favorite among fans of the action genre. The film's reception highlighted the divide between critical and audience perspectives. While professional reviewers often dismissed it as shallow fan service, audiences embraced it for precisely that reason. It was a movie designed for fans, not for critics, and in that respect, it succeeded. The cheering in theaters, the excitement of seeing legends together, and the meme-worthy one-liners all contributed to a reception that was more about enjoyment than analysis. Over time, Expendables 2's critical reputation has softened slightly, as many now view it with a sense of nostalgia. What may have been criticized as excessive or shallow in 2012 is often reinterpreted today as part of the film's charm. It is seen not as a failed attempt at serious storytelling, but as an intentional celebration of the action genre's most recognizable tropes. In this sense, the film's reception has evolved, shifting from polarized debate toward general acknowledgement of its place as a guilty pleasure and a cultural artifact of action cinema. When Expendables 2 premiered in 2012, it was more than just another action movie. It was a cinematic event that brought together legends of the genre in a way audiences had only dreamed about. While critics had mixed opinions about the story and execution, there was no denying that the film made a lasting mark on both the action genre and pop culture at large. Its legacy can be measured in the way it revived interest in ensemble action films, its influence on subsequent movies and media, and the enduring fascination with nostalgia-driven cinema. Expendables 2 became not only a sequel but also a statement that the old guard of action cinema still had the power to captivate audiences in an era dominated by superheroes, CGI blockbusters, and reboots. One of the most immediate impacts of Expendables 2 was its reinforcement of the ensemble action model. While the first Expendables had introduced the concept of gathering multiple stars into one explosive package, the sequel expanded the scope with bigger names, more cameos, and even larger set pieces. This escalation set a new standard for what audiences could expect from ensemble action films. Hollywood studios took note, and in the years following, there was a noticeable increase in attempts to create star-driven ensemble projects, though few matched the spectacle or novelty of Expendables 2. The film also solidified the Expendables franchise as a cultural brand. Without the success of the sequel, it is unlikely that Expendables 3 or even the later Expendables 4 would have been greenlit. Expendables 2 demonstrated that there was not only commercial viability, but also fan enthusiasm for nostalgia-fueled action movies. It tapped into the same cultural vein that supported the revival of other franchises such as Fast and Furious, which had also shifted toward ensemble storytelling. The Expendables proved that audiences wanted to see aging stars return to the screen, and the franchise opened the door for other veteran-led projects. In terms of influence, Expendables 2 helped redefine the role of aging action stars in modern cinema. Sylvester Stallone, Arnold Schwarzenegger, Bruce Willis, Jean-Claude Van Damme, and Chuck Norris were no longer competing for the box office dominance they had enjoyed in the 1980s and 1990s. Instead, they were celebrated collectively as icons. The film turned their age into an asset rather than a liability, presenting them as battle-hardened veterans who had survived decades of conflict. This portrayal resonated with audiences, many of whom had grown up with these stars and were now older themselves. Expendables 2 demonstrated that aging heroes could still draw crowds, paving the way for other late-career resurgences in action, such as Keanu Reeves in John Wick or Tom Cruise in the later Mission Impossible films. The legacy of Expendables 2 is also evident in the way it embraced self-awareness and meta-commentary. The one-liners, jokes, and references to past films turned the movie into both a piece of entertainment and a commentary on its own genre. Arnold Schwarzenegger's "I'm back" line and Chuck Norris's deadpan delivery of a Chuck Norris joke transcended the film, becoming memes and viral moments that circulated across social media. These moments blurred the line between character and actor, making the Expendables franchise as much about the stars' legacies as the fictional mercenaries they portrayed. This blending of nostalgia and meta-humor influenced other films, encouraging filmmakers to lean into self-referential comedy as a way to celebrate and satirize their own work. The influence of Expendables 2 also extended beyond cinema. The film inspired a wave of merchandise, including video games, comic books, and collectibles that allowed fans to immerse themselves in the Expendables universe. While not all of these ventures were critically acclaimed, they reflected the commercial potential of the brand. Moreover, the Expendables aesthetic, over-the-top violence, exaggerated masculinity, and tongue-in-cheek humor, was echoed in parodies, fan videos, and online culture. Television shows and comedians frequently reference the film, often using it as shorthand for excess and nostalgia. In terms of the action genre, Expendables 2 reaffirmed the viability of practical stunt work in an age increasingly dominated by CGI. While the film used digital effects for blood and enhancement, much of its spectacle came from real explosions, vehicle chases, and fight choreography performed by seasoned stunt teams. This emphasis on practical action influenced other filmmakers who saw the value in grounding their spectacle in tangible stunts. Franchises like Mad Max, Fury Road, and the John Wick series drew inspiration from this philosophy, blending practical choreography with stylized presentation. The film's legacy also intersects with discussions of masculinity in cinema. Expendables 2 presented a vision of hypermasculinity that was both celebratory and self-parodying. The characters were larger-than-life warriors, embodying toughness, loyalty, and aggression, yet the film often undercut their seriousness with humor and exaggeration. This duality influenced how masculinity was portrayed in subsequent films, encouraging a balance between sincerity and irony. Even superhero franchises like Marvel began to incorporate more self-aware humor into their depictions of traditionally stoic heroes, echoing the balance seen in Expendables 2. While the film had a lasting influence, it also revealed the limits of its formula. Expendables 3, released 2 years later, attempted to replicate the success of Expendables 2 but was criticized for overstuffing the cast, watering down the violence to achieve a PG-13 rating, and losing the raw energy that made the second installment memorable. This demonstrated that Expendables 2 represented the peak of the franchise's cultural influence. It struck the right balance between nostalgia, excess, and self-awareness, a balance that proved difficult to replicate. Beyond Hollywood, the film's influence reached international markets, particularly in Asia, where action stars like Jet Li, who appeared briefly in the film, were celebrated alongside Western icons. The Expendables franchise fostered a sense of global action cinema, uniting stars from different traditions into a shared spectacle. Expendables 2 highlighted the cross-cultural appeal of action movies, proving that the language of explosions, fights, and heroics transcends borders. In the long term, Expendables 2's legacy lies in its role as both homage and bridge. It paid tribute to the golden age of action while bridging the gap to modern audiences who grew up with faster pacing, digital effects, and superhero dominance. It validated the careers of its stars, reminding the world of their enduring charisma, while also influencing the trajectory of the genre by encouraging ensemble casts, practical stunts, and self-referential humor. The release of Expendables 2 in 2012 was not only a cinematic event, but also a cultural reunion. Audiences around the world were drawn to the film not merely for its explosions and fight sequences, but for what it represented: a chance to relive the glory days of action cinema and see their childhood heroes assembled in one over-the-top spectacle. For many viewers, the film became a mirror of their own nostalgia, a celebration of the movies they grew up watching in the 1980s and 1990s. Audience reflection on Expendables 2 is therefore layered. It is both about the enjoyment of the movie itself and about the emotions, memories, and identities audiences projected onto it. For older audiences who had grown up with Stallone, Schwarzenegger, Van Damme, Willis, and Lundgren, Expendables 2 felt like a long-awaited dream come true. These were the stars who had defined their teenage years, plastered across posters, VHS covers, and arcade machines. To see them all gathered in one film was to recapture a piece of youth. Many viewers described the experience as a kind of cinematic time machine, transporting them back to an era when action films were straightforward, testosterone-driven, and unapologetically larger than life. It was not about whether the plot made sense or whether the performances were nuanced. It was about seeing the legends together, still fighting, still surviving. For younger audiences, the reflection was different, but equally impactful. Many millennials and even Gen Z viewers approached Expendables 2 with curiosity rather than nostalgia, having grown up in a cinematic era dominated by superheroes, CGI-driven blockbusters, and high-concept franchises like Harry Potter or the Dark Knight trilogy. For them, Expendables 2 was a chance to glimpse the cinematic icons their parents or older siblings idolized. Some found the over-the-top violence and one-liners campy, even absurd, but others embraced the film as a crash course in the exaggerated masculinity of classic action cinema. For this generation, Expendables 2 offered a kind of pop culture education, a window into the cinematic language of the past, albeit filtered through self-parody and nostalgia. Audiences also reflected on the film in terms of its themes, often in ways more personal than critics acknowledged. Billy's tragic death resonated with many viewers as a reminder of lost innocence and the inevitability of sacrifice. Fans discussed how his story symbolized the futility of trying to escape a violent life once it has taken hold, a theme that mirrored the Expendables themselves. The scene where Barney and his team read Billy's letter became one of the most emotionally discussed moments, with many interpreting it as a reminder that even warriors long for peace, love, and a future they rarely achieve. In online discussions and fan forums, audiences connected this moment to their own reflections on aging, sacrifice, and the cost of loyalty. At the same time, humor was one of the most celebrated aspects of the film among audiences. The self-aware jokes, references to past roles, and exaggerated one-liners became instant crowd pleasers. Many viewers described laughing out loud in theaters when Chuck Norris delivered his Chuck Norris joke or when Schwarzenegger and Willis exchanged meta-references about their catchphrases. These moments transcended the narrative, creating a communal sense of joy. Audiences reflected not just on the humor itself, but on what it represented, a willingness by the actors to poke fun at themselves and share in the joke with their fans. In this way, Expendables 2 created a bond between the performers and the audience, acknowledging the absurdity of the genre while celebrating it at the same time. Generational reflection played a key role in the film's interpretation. Older audiences often saw themselves mirrored in the Expendables, aging but unbroken, scarred by life yet still capable of extraordinary feats. Younger audiences, meanwhile, interpreted the Expendables as exaggerated father figures or mythical warriors, larger-than-life archetypes who belonged to a bygone era but whose influence still echoed in modern culture. This generational divide shaped interpretations. For one group, Expendables 2 was nostalgia. For another, it was myth-making. Audiences also reflected on the film's portrayal of masculinity, often with mixed feelings. Some embraced the hyper-masculine bravado as a refreshing contrast to the more emotionally conflicted heroes of modern cinema. Others saw it as campy or outdated, interpreting the excessive muscles, explosions, and bravado as a parody rather than a sincere portrayal. In both cases, audiences found meaning, either as a celebration of strength and resilience or as a tongue-in-cheek commentary on how action films once exaggerated male identity to almost cartoonish levels. International audiences added another layer of reflection. In markets like China, Eastern Europe, and Latin America, where American action films of the 1980s and 1990s had been wildly popular, Expendables 2 was received as both a continuation and validation of that global legacy. Viewers in these regions reflected on the Expendables as international heroes, men whose films had transcended cultural barriers and become part of a shared global imagination. The presence of Jet Li, even in a smaller role, reinforced the film's international appeal and gave Asian audiences a stronger point of connection. Online fan communities played a major role in shaping audience interpretation after the film's release. Forums, social media pages, and fan-made videos celebrated the cast, replayed favorite one-liners, and debated which action star shined brightest. Memes circulated widely, particularly those referencing Chuck Norris and Schwarzenegger's famous line exchanges. In this way, Expendables 2 extended beyond the theater into digital culture, where fans could continue reflecting, joking, and celebrating together. The film became not just a cinematic experience, but an ongoing conversation that lived on in internet humor and fan creativity. Some audiences also reflected on the Expendables as symbols of endurance. The stars themselves were often discussed not only in terms of their characters, but also in terms of their real-world careers. Stallone's perseverance despite injuries, Schwarzenegger's return to film after politics, Van Damme's late career resurgence, all became part of the audience's interpretation. The Expendables were not just fictional mercenaries. They were avatars for the actors themselves, men who had fought battles both on screen and off, and whose survival symbolized resilience in the face of time. For many fans, watching Expendables 2 was a way to celebrate the stars' real lives as much as their fictional ones. However, not all audience reflection was uncritical. Some viewers expressed disappointment that the film did not push the boundaries further, either in terms of character depth or innovative action. Others lamented that certain stars, such as Jet Li or Bruce Willis, were underused. These critiques reflected audience expectations that the film's ensemble would deliver not just nostalgia, but also fresh dynamics. Yet, even these criticisms often came from a place of passion, showing that audiences were deeply invested in how the film honored their heroes. While Expendables 2 is often remembered for its explosive action sequences, ensemble cast, and tongue-in-cheek humor, a deeper look reveals that the film also weaves subtle threads of character development and interpersonal dynamics that give it more resonance than a mere spectacle of gunfire and explosions. The movie may not be character-driven in the traditional sense, but it offers arcs that explore loyalty, sacrifice, vengeance, and the passage of time. These arcs, though sometimes buried beneath the carnage, allow the audience to invest in the Expendables as more than just muscle-bound soldiers. At the heart of the story is Barney Ross, played by Sylvester Stallone. Barney embodies the reluctant leader archetype, a man hardened by decades of violence yet still carrying a sense of responsibility for his team. In Expendables 2, Barney's arc is largely shaped by his relationship with Billy the Kid, the young recruit who represents innocence and a possible future beyond mercenary work. Barney initially sees Billy's youthful optimism as both refreshing and slightly naive, but he ultimately embraces the young soldier's dreams of leaving the life of violence behind. Billy's tragic death becomes the emotional anchor of Barney's arc, forcing him to confront the futility of his own life path and igniting his desire for revenge against Jean Villain. While Barney does not undergo a radical transformation, his arc highlights the tension between being a protector and being an avenger. It shows that leadership comes with guilt and sacrifice, and it cements Barney as a man who is both respected and burdened by the lives under his command. The death of Billy the Kid serves as the most poignant character arc in the film, albeit a short one. Played by Liam Hemsworth, Billy is a former sniper who joined the team in hopes of earning money before leaving to live peacefully with his girlfriend. His role in the film is designed to embody the concept of lost potential, a character who contrasts the grizzled veterans with his youthful optimism and emotional openness. Audiences connect with him quickly because he represents what the Expendables might have been if they had chosen a different path. Billy's death is brutal and abrupt, shocking both the team and the audience. His arc, though brief, gives the film its emotional weight and serves as the catalyst for the Expendables' mission of vengeance. Billy symbolizes the cost of violence and the tragedy of lives cut short, a reminder that in a world of mercenaries, hope is fragile and fleeting. Jean Villain, portrayed by Jean-Claude Van Damme, is the film's antagonist, and while his character arc is not one of growth, it provides a clear counterpoint to Barney's. Villain is ruthless, calculating, and motivated by greed and power. Unlike the Expendables, who operate by a code of loyalty and brotherhood, Villain represents pure self-interest and cruelty. His lack of remorse for Billy's death positions him as not just a villain but as a symbol of corruption and inhumanity. Van Damme's portrayal of Villain also plays on his legacy as an action star, turning him into a dark mirror of the heroes. While Villain's arc is static, his role provides Barney and his team with a moral enemy to rally against, reinforcing their identity as mercenaries with principles. Lee Christmas, played by Jason Statham, serves as Barney's right-hand man, and his arc in the film is tied less to external conflict and more to his evolving role within the team. In the first Expendables, Christmas struggled with personal relationships, particularly with his girlfriend Lacey. In Expendables 2, his role shifts toward being the loyal lieutenant and skilled fighter who provides balance to Barney's leadership. While Christmas's arc is not deeply personal in this installment, his banter, loyalty, and combat skills help define the team dynamic. He functions as the voice of pragmatism and levity, offering both comic relief and reliable support. His relationship with Barney reinforces the theme of brotherhood, showing how trust and shared battles form bonds stronger than blood. Gunnar Jensen, played by Dolph Lundgren, is perhaps the most surprising character in terms of development. In the first film, he was depicted as unstable and unpredictable, struggling with substance abuse and loyalty issues. In Expendables 2, he undergoes a redemption arc, finding stability and reaffirming his place within the team. Gunnar provides comic relief through his awkward attempts at humor and even moments of intellectual flair, such as references to his engineering background, which echo Lundgren's real-life academic achievements. While Gunnar does not have a deeply emotional arc, his transformation from liability to valued teammate is an important thread, showing that even damaged individuals can find redemption through loyalty and purpose. Hail Caesar, portrayed by Terry Crews, and Toll Road, played by Randy Couture, serve as the muscle of the team, but they are not without their own arcs. Caesar's brash humor and love for heavy weaponry make him a fan favorite, and his arc lies in his unwavering loyalty and resilience. Though he is injured in battle, he remains committed to the mission, embodying the Expendables' resilience. Toll Road's arc is subtler, revolving around his role as the team's steady presence. His dialogue about his cauliflower ear, though humorous, also reflects the physical toll of a life of fighting. Together, these characters add texture to the group dynamic, representing camaraderie and endurance. Eun Young, played by Jet Li, has a smaller role in Expendables 2 compared to the first film, but his character arc remains notable. At the beginning of the film, Young participates in the opening mission but departs soon after. While his absence is felt, his early involvement reinforces the Expendables' global identity and their reliance on diverse skill sets. Yang's arc in this film is limited, but his presence reminds audiences of the international dimension of the team and their shared values despite cultural differences. Booker, played by Chuck Norris, enters the story as a legendary lone wolf, a one-man army whose reputation precedes him. Though his appearance is largely comedic and self-referential, his character arc functions as a mythological insertion into the Expendables universe. He is less a fully fleshed-out character and more a symbol of invincible heroism, almost like a legend come to life. His arc reflects the film's embrace of myth-making and nostalgia, giving audiences a larger-than-life figure to marvel at before he disappears back into the shadows. The supporting arcs of characters like Trench, played by Arnold Schwarzenegger, and Church, played by Bruce Willis, also contribute to the overall narrative. Trench shifts from a rival to an ally, highlighting themes of cooperation and respect among veterans. Church, on the other hand, represents the bureaucratic side of the Expendables world, a reminder that even mercenaries must answer to higher powers. These arcs add layers of context to the Expendables operations, situating their personal struggles within a broader network of alliances and rivalries. Overall, the character arcs in Expendables 2 are not about radical transformations, but about affirmations of loyalty, brotherhood, and resilience. The Expendables are not characters who change dramatically, they are characters who endure. The script of Expendables 2, credited to Richard Wenk and Sylvester Stallone, is a fascinating study in how dialogue can serve multiple functions within an ensemble action film. It not only drives the plot forward but also provides humor, nostalgia, and self-awareness. While many action films rely heavily on spectacle to keep audiences engaged, Expendables 2 leans just as much on its dialogue to remind audiences why they came to see this group of stars together in the first place. The film's words carry the weight of decades of cinematic history, transforming conversations into winks at the audience, celebrations of iconic one-liners, and reflections on themes of loyalty, aging, and vengeance. At its core, the dialogue balances three primary tones: earnest emotion, explosive humor, and meta-commentary. Earnestness comes through in moments like Billy's farewell letter. Humor dominates in exchanges between team members, and meta-commentary arrives in the form of self-referential jokes, such as Schwarzenegger and Willis trading famous catchphrases. This tonal blend gives Expendables 2 its unique voice, keeping it from feeling like just another generic action screenplay. One of the most discussed pieces of dialogue in the film is Billy's heartfelt letter, written to his girlfriend as he plans to leave the Expendables. In it, he expresses his hopes for a peaceful life, his dreams of leaving violence behind, and his love for her. The scriptwriting here departs from the larger-than-life bravado of the rest of the film, instead embracing sincerity and vulnerability. This moment of emotional dialogue becomes a central turning point for the team and the audience, grounding the film in human cost and tragedy. Billy's words also serve as dramatic irony, as viewers sense that his idealistic dreams are doomed in a world built on mercenary violence. It is this shift in tone that makes his death such a powerful motivator for the Expendables' revenge. Contrast that with the banter between Barney and Christmas, which captures the camaraderie and humor that define the team's relationships. Their exchanges are quick, sharp, and often filled with sarcasm. This dialogue showcases the bond between the characters and gives the audience a sense of their long history together. Without needing extended exposition, the script conveys trust, rivalry, and affection through verbal sparring. In many ways, these exchanges are as important as the action sequences because they remind audiences that the Expendables are not just killers but brothers who have shared countless battles. Humor plays a vital role in the film's dialogue. Much of it comes in the form of one-liners, a staple of the action genre, but in Expendables 2, these lines often carry self-awareness. Chuck Norris's cameo as Booker includes the infamous Chuck Norris joke, spoken by Norris himself in a deadpan tone. This moment encapsulates the film's scriptwriting philosophy. It is not afraid to break the fourth wall without explicitly doing so, inviting the audience to laugh both at and with the absurdity of the spectacle. Similarly, Arnold Schwarzenegger's "I'm back" line and Bruce Willis's playful jab about Schwarzenegger being out of the office draw directly on the actor's cinematic legacies. These moments work because they rely on the shared cultural memory of the audience, transforming dialogue into a meta-conversation between stars and fans. Villainous dialogue also plays a crucial role in Expendables 2. Jean Villain, portrayed by Jean-Claude Van Damme, delivers lines that exude arrogance and menace. Unlike the Expendables' playful banter, Villain's dialogue is calculated, cold, and self-aggrandizing. When he executes Billy, his words are designed to provoke and dehumanize, leaving no room for moral ambiguity. The simplicity of his dialogue is intentional. It highlights his role as an unapologetic antagonist, someone defined not by complexity, but by cruelty. This stark difference in tone makes the Expendables' banter more meaningful, as it emphasizes the humanity and humor of the team in contrast to Villain's callousness. The screenplay also pays attention to rhythm and pacing. Conversations rarely drag. Instead, they are clipped and efficient, reflecting the urgency of mercenary life. Yet within this economy of words, the script still finds space for levity. Jokes often punctuate tense moments, preventing the tone from becoming overly grim. This rhythm mirrors the structure of the film itself. Bursts of explosive violence followed by brief pauses of camaraderie or reflection, then a return to action. The dialogue supports this pattern, making the story feel like a dance between chaos and connection. Another key aspect of the script is how it integrates exposition without bogging down the narrative. Rather than relying on lengthy explanations, the writers often use humor or banter to deliver necessary information. For example, conversations about missions, weapons, or strategy are woven into the team's exchanges, keeping the audience informed while maintaining entertainment. This approach allows the film to balance clarity with personality, avoiding the trap of dry exposition. Audiences often interpreted the dialogue as part of the film's nostalgia-driven appeal. Lines that reference the actors' previous roles were seen as gifts to longtime fans, creating a shared language between the film and its viewers. For many, hearing Schwarzenegger and Willis trade lines was not just funny, but emotionally rewarding, a reminder of decades spent watching their movies. These moments of intertextual dialogue turned Expendables 2 into a cinematic celebration of the genre, where words mattered just as much as bullets. In terms of scriptwriting structure, Expendables 2 prioritizes ensemble balance. With such a large cast, it would have been easy for certain characters to fade into the background, but the dialogue ensures that each team member has at least one memorable line or moment. Terry Crews as Caesar cracks jokes about his love of massive weapons, Dolph Lundgren's Gunnar contributes offbeat humor about his intellectual side, and Randy Couture's Toll Road makes light of his cauliflower ear. Even minor characters are given space to shine, ensuring that no one feels disposable. This equitable distribution of dialogue reflects the film's core theme of brotherhood, where every member has a role to play. At the same time, the script acknowledges generational differences through dialogue. Liam Hemsworth's Billy speaks in a softer, more reflective tone than the veterans. His lines often revolve around dreams, family, and a desire for peace, contrasting with the older Expendables' dark humor and fatalistic worldview. This difference in voice highlights the generational divide and amplifies the tragedy of Billy's fate. It shows that while the veterans have adapted to a life of endless combat, the new generation still clings to the possibility of escape. One of the script's most underappreciated achievements is how it uses silence as part of dialogue. Moments such as the team reading Billy's letter or Barney staring wordlessly after Billy's death communicate volumes without words. These silences balance the barrage of one-liners and explosions, reminding audiences that even the toughest mercenaries are not immune to grief. In this way, the script uses both words and the absence of them to shape character and emotion. Critics often dismiss the dialogue as campy or simplistic, but for audiences, its charm lay precisely in its embrace of clichés.